Welcome to Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News, opinions, and insights you won't hear anywhere else. Here's your host, the president of New York's largest independent union, Suffolk AME's Dan Levler.
Welcome to another edition of Suffolk Matters on Walk 97.5 and 94.3 The Shark, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News and views you can't hear anywhere else.
All right, so my guest this morning is Sammy Chu. He's Chief Executive Officer for Edgewise Energy and lots of other things before that. But first and foremost, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Really appreciate being here.
Yeah, so we're going to get into Edgewise and what's going on there, but I think we really need to start with some of your roots and just knowing a little bit about your history and knowing that you were involved with Local 3 IBEW and let's, for our listeners, let's just go through your history to now.
Sure.
Right?
We can replay it for my kids. Maybe they'll even learn something. So I got my meaningful start to my career as a Local 3 electrician so I was an apprentice back in the late 90s. It was, to me, a great opportunity to, which I thought was a great idea, I could earn a paycheck, I can get really nice benefits and a future and a career. And they also, perhaps the biggest draw for me was that they, and this was a very progressive thing for a union, they were way ahead of their time, actually incorporated getting a degree as part of getting as part of going through your apprenticeship. And so you would ultimately end up, when you successfully completed your apprenticeship, not only a journeyman electrician, but also have a college degree, which was something that was important to me. Sure. So in Local 3, I was in Local 3 just under a decade, and it still remains to this day. And as you started by saying, I've had a kind of an unconventional career.
Right.
I've worn a lot of hats and still do. But my experience as a Local 3 apprentice and journeyman, as a volunteer, just as a union member,
right,
is still by far the most foundational and transformative, career and professional experience I've had in my life.
Sure, and I think what gets lost in the shuffle, people know things about unions or think they know things about unions, and a lot of times when people hear about unions, because there's some sort of conflict, and that sells newspapers, and that's generally where people get their union education. But a union has always been, on top of everything else, a secondary source of education. So specifically, Local 3 having these college courses, sending their members and getting that education, that is over and above what I'm talking about. And the other form of education is, everybody is working together as brothers and sisters. So you learn things about, like, hey, should I lease a car or buy a car? Or, there are all of these, life lessons that folks are just passing along to each other, working together. It's, it's generally one big family. And that's something you take from having had a union career at any point in time, whether you did, like you say, about a decade, or you spend your whole life in the union movement. There's value that we don't often talk about there in that.
100%. In fact, my transition into politics and then government really was the roots for that were as a trade unionist. One of the things that Local 3 drove home for me, and they did it in a very structured way. It wasn't just a general statement or feeling. Was that a good union member is a good community member.
Yeah.
And conversely, how I've approached life since, as a public official and now as an entrepreneur and a businessman, that a good community also takes care of its unions, because the unions are a community at their best.
Yeah.
And what really got me onto my path for going into politics and government was Local 3 had this benefit. They had a jury duty benefit, which was a great benefit, that if you got called to serve on a jury, that the government pays you like I don't know, like $1 a day or something, right. That doesn't even cover like a tuna fish sandwich
as a minimum standard.
Well, Local 3 had a fund that they would then reimburse you for your full service to be commensurate with what you would have made if you were working on a job site, but they didn't give it to you for nothing. What you had to do to be eligible for that benefit was take a course called the Citizenship and Responsibility course. And that Citizenship and Responsibility course went through really took you through the nuts and bolts of how your life is governed, right? One of the first things they ask you to do, which is a really remarkable exercise, is who's your state assembly person? Who's your state senator? Who are your town council people? And by the way, this is an exercise I took with me later on, and I would actually fail the test here on the island. It can be a little more difficult.
Yeah.
Because I now ask people, hey, do you know every elected official that represents you? And even people in government politics, oh, sure I do. And they rattle out the state senator, state assemblyman. I'm like, well, what about your library board? What about your water district? What about your fire commissioners?
Yeah.
So I pay good money. I'd win that bet every time if I was a gambling man.
Right.
But that course essentially was my first, since high school, was my first big awareness of like how decisions got made for us,
right,
and how it affected us, and I ended up becoming so enthusiastic in that course that they asked me to then volunteer to teach the course. So I still taught a few sessions of that class to other Local 3 members even after I left the local and went on because I enjoyed it that much, and that was really a way of, that's what sparked my interest in public policy and governance and made me realize how important it was, and beyond just like who was president at the time.
Right. Yeah. And again, it's part of what we're going to talk about today. The idea behind the May Day Music Festival is just like you said, union members are members of the community. And one of the things that unions do is they fight to keep jobs local and keep wages good, because that money then goes back into the economy. Mm-hmm. It stimulates the economy. And what we wanted to do with the May Day Music Festival was to provide an entertaining, fun day for families to come down and see union folks, right? And it's not about coming down and trying to see me or other folks that are, maybe in leadership positions. Most of the people coming to the festival will be union members, just day-to-day union members. And for those people that are curious, like what kinds of people are these? I've heard things, I saw movies or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And you come down and you interact, and when you leave and you've had a great day and everybody that you met was awesome and it was just genuinely fun, well, that's what that community actually is. We wanted to give back to the community. So we don't build this thing for profit. This is a non-for-profit. It is something that we encourage everybody to come down, bring their family, whatever else. We kept the ticket prices low. We added a special discount for union members in addition to all of that. And if any money is generated, it goes into food banks, it goes into scholarships, it goes to support the community. Nothing comes back to the union at all. This is literally a piece like that. And that's what's so inspiring. You talk about having this opportunity, everybody gets that notice in the mail, like, hey, you're up for jury duty. Well, Local 3 had the presence of mind to say, hey, listen, the minimum standard is not enough. We're going to give you what you deserve, but learn about this system. You're a community member, understand how the community works, and I think we're all best served that way.
A funny aside, and I think maybe some AME member, you anyone who's associated with Suffolk will get this joke. I probably wouldn't tell it any other way. I never actually made it to serve on a jury, and the closest I ever came was I made it through the voir dire process, which is the process of elimination.
Yeah.
And the final round, so I made it into the final round, and this was during the time where I was in the, Ballones administration, and there was the district attorney, who has different quarters these days.
Yes.
And it came up. It just says, hey, what do you do? They looked at your job, like, and the judge asked, do you think that you, as a public official, do you think you have the ability to be impartial? And I said, I might not be. And they said, do you think you wouldn't be able to be fair to the defendant? I said, no, honestly, I think I might have trouble trusting the district attorney in anything that office says. And that was, I said it, and I'm like, man, this is my chance. I think I just blew my chance to finally serve on a jury. I've been trying to get on a jury for a decade, and I'm still not on a jury. But to your original point, Dan, I think the union movement, people think of it as, a lot of people just think about it as in the context of wages and benefits, and a lot of people have negative connotations of unions. They see it as just another. I always took exception to them calling unions special interests, because really, unions are not like a lot of other special interests, and so
Right.
they represent people. These are real people,
Yes.
and I think what I've learned in dealing with people, and I've managed many people in many different environments, and had employees in many different roles. Ultimately, what the core of the union movement is about dignity.
Yeah.
So the event that you're doing, like, we're so happy to be a part of it, because this is about, your union's not just there, to call on, when you have a complaint or when you're in your darkest moment.
Right.
Like, a union is something you should be proud of being a part of. A union is something you should be engaged in part of. It's as good as you give into it as well. And at the end of the day, people throughout, in my experience, yes, people like to get paid. People
Yes.
love to get benefits. But no matter what you're getting paid and no matter what benefits you're getting, if there's not dignity in your work and you don't find dignity in your work, I think most people, that affects their job satisfaction. I think that's probably, and I think that there have been many studies to validate this, that people want to go to work and believe they're contributing and doing something good, and it's appreciated. And that's really what the union movement's about. It was about bringing dignity to, people doing their jobs every day.
Sure. Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with that concept. Encapsulating all of that, with the labor movement, one of the distinctions that sometimes gets lost in conversations I've had with folks is, well, and just getting back to like special interest. If you want to say special interest, well, I have a particular interest, and it is the dignity of working people, right? It isn't about all issues all the time. Although we do kind of take a cradle to grave approach, we care holistically about our members. We try to do things that are outside of the workplace important. But with that being said, when we sit down, we work on legislation. We have conversations with folks, from county executive, commissioners, folks at the legislature. It really does come down to, particularly, we are concerned about those hours that they're at work and making sure that they have the resources that they need. That includes having the materials they need to get the job done, but also having enough staff so that everybody doesn't feel so rushed and behind all the time. And I always speak about the altruism of civil servants in general. It's something that we see, and not too long ago we had done another radio show speaking with a state assemblyman who was also very big in the fire service and spent decades doing that. Made his way all the way up to commissioner. But that altruism that you see in the fire service and that altruism you see in civil service in general, I mean, those things are very compatible, and that's why you see a lot of folks in the fire service volunteering their time and energy, also having civil service jobs. Because at the end of the day, they said, what am I going to make of my life? And then sought out and deliberately got jobs where they could help the most amount of people.
Yeah, it's the fact that your event is specifically, it exists not only to bring union members together, but to do it in service of the community at large it's phenomenal. It's great.
Yeah, something we very much believe in. And, so much more we can get into in your history, but I feel like we wouldn't get to everything else that we need to talk about. But, you've had a very long career inside of government as well, making your way up to commissioner of the Labor Department in Suffolk County. And, maybe we could just speak briefly about your time as a public servant working on behalf of large population.
Sure. I was with County Executive Malone when we were in the town of Babylon, which was a really great experience. It was, and we did a lot of wonderful things. And then, truth be told, I was very happy with what I was doing there. And we were, I was running the lawn greenhouse program and working on a lot of, clean energy initiatives when it was kind of like coming into its day. And then, he got elected county executive. So kind of, and it was annoying. It ruined my plans to stay in the town of Babylon for longer.
Right.
And he asked me to come on board, and part of the process was, hey, what positions might you be interested? Everyone had to apply for a position. This wasn't, you still had to, of course we had a relationship. There was trust, but you had to, get the position based on merits.
Right.
And I was actually much more interested in running a department, an agency, than I was in being a deputy county executive or working in the, as they call it, the 12th floor.
Sure.
This audience will know what the 12th floor is. Most people have no idea what that means. Right. But so I expressed my interest in the labor department, And I had done before that, we had done a lot of activity and work around the wine dance, the community wine dance.
Sure.
And I had been very involved in a lot of workforce programs and, interfacing between the needs of the community, interfacing with the building trades, which is a big, initiative and effort and conversation that had to be had. And so many good things have resulted from that over the years. And so I was offered the position of labor commissioner, and I jumped at it. And it was outstanding. I loved it. We actually, that was the time. The budget's a little different now. So I'm really glad you guys are getting the ad positions now. I'm so happy. But back then we inherited the Levy layoffs.
Right.
And so one of the first things I had to do was lay people off, and we did departmental consolidation. So during that year, we initiated the departmental consolidation between Labor Department and Consumer Affairs.
Yeah.
But then we had Sandy, again, another hiccup. And that's when, the county executive asked me to serve an additional role as chief of staff, really to help manage the, response and the recovery. And I just happened, I've had a bit of a hodgepodge career, but somehow, there's a lot of pieces that, ended up, it started with, hey, we just happened to have to figure out how to re-energize like most of the South Shore of Western Suffolk County. And I just happened to know a thing or two about electricity and how it works. And so once Sandy hit, I spent a substantial portion of my final stretch in government, really working on those programs, which still, it's hard to believe we're going to hit the 10th year anniversary this year. And that was kind of a precursor. That was when I had a community sustainability, and that I think that's when really this other priority and realization came about, which was sustainability. And resiliency.
Yeah.
Right. Because we're an island, and that's another priority that we just need to be mindful of.
Sure. And you talk about your varied career, and you talk about early days, working for Local 3. Union member, but not just going out and doing the job, but going to school, getting a degree, the whole nine. And one of the things I think that's been consistent about you in your career is labor involvement or labor adjacent, right? Yep. And another thing is really just having that understanding and a passion towards energy. So I want to talk to you a little bit about first and foremost, what is community power Long Island?
So our company, Edgewise Energy, a few years ago started developing, these projects, which are community distributed generation projects. They're projects that allow us through a LIPA tariff. It's a concept that's been around for about a little more than a decade, and LIPA adopted, about 5 or 6 years ago. That allows, providers like us to inject energy into the grid and then share the benefits of that generated energy with everyday, residents. And the reason why that tariff came to exist was because the clean energy movement had limits. People weren't able to participate. So we're very, very supportive, and I have been extremely supportive of it for, certainly my entire public career.
Right.
Of if people can get solar in their home, they should. Mm-hmm. If people can make their home more efficient, they should. But there are people that don't have, for one reason or another, the ability to do that. Renters, for instance, if you're renting an apartment and you don't get to make the choice, I'm going to put solar on the roof. Some people don't have the means. Here on the island, it's a regional issue we face. We have people who are leaving the island. They don't want an installation on their home because they don't know if they're going to stay here.
Right.
Affordability is an issue.
Yeah.
So the community distributed generation tariff allows people to subscribe energy from a clean energy production facility that's not co-located with their place of residence. So Community Power LI is our brand out to consumers to subscribe them to this energy. So we will be injecting, megawatts of energy into the grid.
Right.
Hopefully, we're on pace to do it to begin this summer. We actually broke ground on our first project in Melville, right up the road.
Awesome.
And subscribing it for 10% savings to everyday Long Islanders. And that's why we partnered. Our initial partner was Community Development Corporation of Long Island, who, is the premier agency for affordable housing and development. And our second, partners that we brought on, our second and third were the Buildings and Construction Trade Council of Mass and Suffolk and the Long Island Federation of Labor. And because we want the people who should be benefiting from this energy to have access to it.
Yeah, it's again, I think it's a great concept, and I know you are intimately aware of how all of this works, and I'm going to attempt to swing at what I think it is. So basically, you're creating clean energy. You're basically setting up, fuel cell farms and creating all this clean energy, dumping it back into the grid. So, that energy goes back to, how we get our electricity in the first place. And the average consumer signs up and says, I would like to accept some of that free energy in exchange for a 10% reduction in my bill.
That's right. We inject this energy. It's credits. It's on a credit basis as a paper transaction for people to sign up with us. It's not done in real time. It's a paper transaction. No one ever has to come to your house or install anything. You simply give us your information, do the intake. You pay Community Power LI 10% less than you otherwise would be paying on your PSEG Long Island bill. And I know we get asked a lot, like, what's the catch? What's the downside? There's no upfront fees. In fact, we give a signing bonus when people have their first bill. We are giving them a signing bonus. We don't have there's no long-term, unbreakable contracts. This isn't like, I think I was paying. I think that one of the hardest things of my entire life to do was to figure out how to cancel like my Bally's membership. Right, it's not like one of those situations. People. It's kind of funny, but people. What was one of the most difficult times? Trying to figure out how to cancel my.
Try and cancel a gym membership.
Yeah.
Good luck. Yeah.
So it's nothing like that. It's very simple. It's a simple process. CommunityPowerLI.com. You go on and put in the information and. Once we're online, you'll be saving 10% on your electricity.
So I got a flyer in the mail. I did my own homework. And then I went on to talk to nobody about this, right? I didn't reach out. I have various folks that I can talk to in this whole world. I did my research. I looked at it. It was a no-brainer. I signed up. The day I got the flyer, I did my research. I signed up. I think it's going to be very similar for a lot of people. Trust but verify, right? Look into it, make sense of it all. But basically, you're signing up to get clean energy that's better for the environment for a reduction on your bill.
That's right. The energy we're injecting is nearly 30% less, carbon dioxide, and virtually 100%. It's like 99.9% emissions reduction from what the grid would otherwise require to generate electricity. So if you looked at a traditional power plant, you would see, smoke coming out of stacks, and that's the particular emissions, which are the kind of the nasty stuff. That's why the stacks are so high, to kind of get it out of breathing range. That's NOx and SOx. We won't go super deep into that, but we virtually eliminate almost all of that, and we're doing it now. We're huge supporters. I'm both professionally as a company and also from an activist and just a engaged citizen perspective. Corporate citizen and private citizen, supportive of wind. We actually support a lot of solar projects, but these things take time, right? The offshore wind, I think, unless you're, I don't know, I think most people are very excited about it,
right?
But it's going to take time.
Yes.
So these are realized savings now, both financially and environmentally, and we're extremely excited about it.
Oh, it's great.
And for union members to be able to participate in it, that's just, for me, this is like, this is like professional nirvana, right? I'm able to actually do something that is going to be able to support my kids and through college and help and be able to help everyday Long Islanders.
And, so a couple of union questions with regards to this. One, these facilities are being built and then maintained by union labor?
Yeah, so it was extremely important to me and our company. It's part of our values as a CEO and founder of the company. My values are pretty firmly, stamped on the company. Who would I be if I went on and on about how important, labor was to me, and then went and tried to save some money, building my developments non-union. So that was actually, and I think a lot of people don't realize how things get built. I didn't. These are not cheap projects. I'm only out of government a few years. I didn't just write a check and say, hey, we're going to build these. It requires investment. Mm-hmm. So it was actually something that you have to sell to investment. You have to make a case. Why should we build this union when we could build it, less. We could try and build it less. And I'm not always convinced that you could build things less. I'm not sure.
Well, not right.
Yeah,
you could build it cheaper, but not correct.
But you have to make a case,
Yeah.
and we did, and we made a strong case. And part of that case is this partnership. Part of this case is that, hey, if you do, and my life has taught me that, when you give, you will get back, and it's not transactional. It's not something that necessarily happens like that moment. But I feel very good about the things that have come back to me in life because I've been supportive and lived true to principles, and we're very proud to be building this, these facilities, 100% with Building Trades Union, and that's why I asked Maddie. I asked Maddie Arasich. I said, how many? Just out of curiosity, after how many developers come out to you and preemptively before you even going for permitting and say, hey, we're committing to voluntarily, we're gonna build this, and not he said, well, you were the one, last year. So we're proud to be that, and treating labor, which I think is another thing that if you don't come from it, it's hard for people to sometimes grasp.
Right.
If you treat labor like a partner, a lot of people approach and treat labor as an adversary, and I think that is something that we definitely need to do course correction on in a lot of quarters.
Organized labor is there for working people, right? So making this commitment, getting folks like Matt Arasich from the Long Island Building Trades, Ryan Stanton and John Durso over at Long Island Feds, and getting them involved and getting them excited for something like this. Ultimately, what they're trying to do, why I'm talking to you today in general, is to get the word out to folks in the world. Everybody we're talking to has a job. There's very few billionaires listening to our show this morning. I would venture less than one. And the fact of the matter is we're all out there working. We see opportunities like this. We invest in opportunities like this because it's good for all working people. Our focus is not just our little corner of the world. It sometimes gets painted that way, but it is in the interest of all working people. And that's why, I think this is an important conversation to have. I think it's important that people understand what you're trying to do here, which is make the environment better, reduce people's bills. I mean, the buzz of the world right now, CPI, and how that's affecting not just local expenses, but global expenses, everything that's going on everywhere. And finding these little ways of being part of the solution, making the world a little safer, a little bit better, a little more affordable, and improving, the middle class life.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate your leadership and what you're doing with AME. The fact that you have a mind for that. We've talked a lot about how much we're both supportive of the labor movement, but it's just like anything else. It's not all not all unions are created equally, and I think specifically for there are many AME members that are very near and dear to me that I really have a fondness for, having worked with them closely. And you have so many wonderful members.
Sure.
I think it's wonderful that you guys are, engaged, not living in a bubble and looking for ways not only to make your members' lives better, but doing it in a way that brings in all these external, initiatives.
Yeah, everyone. So, legislation, again, and maybe some of the listeners are sick of hearing about it, but we have a small population inside of government that really handles those emergency phone calls when they come in, whether it's a fire or a rescue situation, something that the police department needs to get involved in. You're going to have various responders go out to deal with a situation. But those folks have a tremendously stressful life, work life. Every call they get is bad. It's more than likely the worst day in someone's life. And to get the state to recognize them as first responders, our goal was not to have our members who do that job recognized. It was to have all the folks in the state of New York that do that job, union or not, recognized as first responders because it was the right thing to do. And, we're appreciative the governor signed that into law on 9/11 last year, and now across the state of New York, these folks are recognized as first responders because they are first responders. But it goes to the philosophy of what we do. Everything that we do is on behalf of the greater population. Yes, our focus is on our members, what it is they do, making sure that they have the resources necessary, making sure that there's dignity in their work. But additionally, it's all people are working people, right? And so that tends to be the focus, and that's why we do the May Day Music Festival the way we do. There's a lot of ways to structure this, but it wasn't right for us sit down and talk this thing through and say, how are we going to put on a festival? What are the focuses going to be? How are we going to structure this? And it really did come down to, we need to educate the public on what it is to be a union member. Let them see firsthand, not what they're doing on their job, not, some dispute that's going on. Let's see them on a Saturday, just hanging out with their family. We want them to see that. And then we say, let's assume we're successful. Let's try and do this, and let's work this thing to assume that we're successful. If we are successful, we will bring in the resources necessary to cover the cost of doing something like this. Maybe there's something left over. What's our responsibility then? Well, it's scholarship, it's food banking, it's making sure that, everything that we're doing here is going back to the community in some way, because that's really the heart of the labor movement. So, listen, I could talk to you for quite a bit about the May Day Music Festival and why we're so excited, but maybe another way to do that is just to simply thank you for getting involved, for seeing what it is and wanting to be involved. And for you, the life that you live, you could have dedicated yourself in a number of different ways, but you found ways to help the most amount of people every step of the way. So really appreciate you, really appreciate what you're bringing into this world. People's lives are better because of the ideas you've implemented. And again, I just want to thank you for being our guest this morning and talking a little bit about Edgewise and how this whole program can help the everyday energy consumer, anyone who needs electricity at any point in time. It's a good thing. So again, my guest this morning was Sammy Chu, Chief Executive Officer for Edgewise Energy. Look it up, learn more, get involved in the program. Again, the name of the program is Community Power Long Island. It's to your advantage. Sammy, again, thank you for joining us. And to our listeners, we'll speak to you next week.